Okay, so I'm going to look at this game where you managed to get a draw against an opponent that's higher rated than you. And I noticed one of the questions you asked is, what can you do to spend less time on your move? Now, what I find is very often the reason why you would think a long time on your move is because you're not sure about your opponent's threats. And that's the first thing you should actually do in any position. Identify your opponent's threats. It's the first point also in the calculation process. If you remember from the 10-day chess challenge, the first step in the calculation process is to identify your opponent's threats. Now, if you know what your opponent's threats are, then it gives you a lot more confidence to calculate, because you will know whether you must find a defense against your opponent's threats, or whether you have a free hand to actually continue finding a way to improve your position. Okay, so I'm going to look through this game and make some comments if I find a position where I can do that. Okay, this move c4, it's not a mistake, but there's something interesting I want to tell you about the move. If black plays the move c4, then he releases a lot of tension in the center. White is usually quite happy to see this move c4 because he can just play the bishop back, and now this pawn is very strong in the center and it doesn't have a challenger. He doesn't have to worry at which point do you actually going to exchange your c pawn for his d pawn. So as I said, it's not a mistake, but if you play this move c4, then pretty much it means you have to follow up with b5 and at some point want to play b4. You want to expand on the queen side and you want to attack on the queen side. So as long as that is your plan and you want to insist on that plan, then playing c4 is okay. Okay, so if we continue, you played b5, so you follow the correct idea, but here you lose the whole idea of expanding on the queen side because your c4 pawn is not supported by the e4 pawn anymore. So I think you mentioned here also that the computer didn't like this move, and I think the main reason the computer didn't like this move is because you lose support on the c4 pawn, which means it's going to be very difficult to advance on the queen side, and the center has become open, so most of the attention is going to be in the center now. And as I just said, the fact that this pawn is now on c4 actually makes that black doesn't have as much control over the center anymore. Okay, if I understand you correctly, you spent quite a bit of time in this situation trying to calculate some things. And now, as I said, what you must do here is you must find what is white's threats. And sometimes a position looks very difficult, but actually the threats aren't all that bad if you try to calculate them. So I think here a move like h6, okay, it's maybe a okay defense. Let me just think a bit. Well, I personally would be a bit uncomfortable with this move because after bishop takes sacrifice, your king safety is going to be a significant issue for a long time. And I personally wouldn't like to play this as black. Maybe I would think this is a more natural move. Instead of playing h6, to play the queen to d5. The queen comes into attack. What's also nice about this move is it's not easy for white to attack the queen, and the queen is nice and centralized here. And at the same time, you don't give white the opportunity to open up your king so easily. Usually moving a pawn in front of your king is not advisable, because the moment you do that, then you are conceding something, and your opponent can often make use of that extra weakened squares, or even sacrifice on the advanced pawn and open up your king. So ideally you want to keep these pawns in a row like this. It's the best defense for your king. But okay, let's continue. You played h6. Okay, good move. Queen d5 comes in now. The only difference is now the pawn is already on h6, so from experience you will now know that putting the pawn on h6 can often lead to possible sacrifices. Okay, the problem with this tactic, I'm not sure if you understood exactly from your analysis, I'm not sure if you understood exactly what the problem would be with bishop d6. And the big part of the problem is your knight's undefended. So he can always just simply win a pawn by taking on h6 because the rook is going to take on e4 next. And if you take there, then he just plays check and he gets a pawn in any case and a strong position. So the main point of this sacrifice, bishop takes h6, is not so much that he's going to checkmate you or attack his king, but it's more the fact that he's winning a pawn and because of this discovered attack on the knight. So that's just a tactical pattern, and you will get used to that tactical patterns if you study tactics. Okay, I don't think it was all that great for him to give away his bishop for the knight, because now I think I slightly prefer black's position. Reason is you've got a bishop versus the knight. Okay, this position is very equal. Maybe black has got a slightly more comfortable position. And especially now that he gave you the open B file. So white even has to become careful of some tactics here. With his king and his rook on the same dark squares as your bishop. Okay, now here we have something interesting. Here you went for the draw. With this tactical idea of bishop f4 check, you can't take your bishop, else you take his rook. But I think it could be psychologically that you went for the draw here, because your opponent is higher rated and you've thought for a long time already. But it will be useful if you adapt the mindset that you're going to try to win, and if your opponent makes a mistake, then you're going to try to take advantage of it. I remember Magnus Carlsen said something. He said, I'm going to make 40 good moves and I challenge my opponent to do the same. Now that's a very good mindset, because if your opponent slips on one of that 40 moves, then you have to be ready to take advantage of it. And yeah, you could have taken advantage, as you saw in your analysis, by playing rook c1. I think it's a psychological reason that you didn't actually find this move, or if you found it, why you didn't play it. Okay, so just to summarize, I think what you can learn from this game is that concentrate on finding your opponent's threats. If you are 100% sure what your opponent is really threatening, then it gives you more confidence to start calculating your own moves. And in many cases you'll feel there's danger, but if you calculate the threats, then you'll see there are certain ways that you can defend it. Or maybe you'll see that the threats aren't all that serious. And if they are serious, then you know you need to focus on that to try find a solution. If your opponent's got a serious threat, then there's no point about thinking about how you can improve your position. You have to focus all your energy on defending against the threat. That's the first thing. Think about the threats. It will also help you make moves quicker. Then your other question was, how can you see that tactics coming? For example, the sacrifice on bishop h6. I think that's quite a natural sacrifice that you should be aware of, because you'll notice that one of the elements in the evaluation thinking process is king safety. And if you are at all times aware of king safety, then you will also be aware of moves that open up your king, because the king is the most vulnerable piece on the board and you want to try keep him safe. Okay, so I hope you learned something from this review also, and good luck with your next game. Cheers.